"Oh my God! The twins fell into the pool!" The choked cry of millionaire James echoed through the luxurious mansion. His engagement party should have been a moment of joy, but in an instant, it turned into a nightmare. The twins, Emma and Ethan, had slipped and plunged into the pool glittering with candlelight. The entire courtyard erupted in chaos, hundreds of guests screaming, cameras crashing to the ground. But what shattered James's heart was not only the sight of his children sinking beneath the water, but the truth. The woman he was about to marry didn't take a single step. So who was it that did the unthinkable? The laughter rang out, champagne glasses clinked, and warm golden lights shimmered across the crystal-clear pool in the luxurious Los Angeles mansion. It all looked like a dazzling snapshot, straight out of a magazine. But in a fleeting moment, everything shattered. A scream ripped through the air, sharp and urgent. The children fell into the pool. The sound pierced the soft background music, cut through the hollow congratulations, and pulled every gaze toward the glittering water. On the surface, two tiny bodies flailed, their small hands thrashing in desperation. Emma and Ethan, barely over a year old, had slipped from the polished marble edge straight into the deep pool. Time seemed to slow. A cameraman's equipment thudded to the ground. Shouts erupted, overlapping in chaos. An older woman clutched her chest and sobbed, yet no one moved. Vanessa, the bride-to-be, radiant in a shimmering silver Versace gown, stood frozen. Her flawless face, perfected with expensive makeup, was stripped down to pure panic. She clutched her mouth, screaming, "Help!" as if the sound itself could lift the children out of the water. But her body stayed motionless, her feet rooted to the ground. James, the millionaire groom in a tailored black Italian suit, faltered too. His eyes locked, sweat trailing down his temple. A second dragged on like eternity. The wealthy, powerful father who graced financial magazine covers suddenly looked helpless, paralyzed before the terrified eyes of his own children. Amid the chaos, another sound broke through, the sharp crash of a glass hitting the floor, and then one figure dove into the water. Not the bride, not the groom, not any of the tuxedo-clad guests. It was Nia Johnson, the young black maid, barely in her 20s, who had just been quietly carrying a tray of champagne through the crowd. Her plain uniform clung to her frame as her soft-soled shoes slipped, yet she hurled herself forward, unbothered by the stares or screams around her. The pool erupted into shards of liquid crystal under the lights, swallowing her slender figure. Her wet curls clung to her cheeks, but her arms stretched out strong and sure. In the swirl, she pulled Emma tight against her chest, then twisted to grab Ethan, kicking powerfully beneath the surface. On the deck, panicked cries overlapped. "Oh my God! Somebody call 911. Cameras flashed non-stop, capturing a scene both disastrous and heroic. James collapsed at the pool's edge, trembling hands reaching out, stammering his children's names, but his eyes were locked on Nia. This young woman, an anonymous name on a hotel payroll, suddenly became the sole focus in a sea of chaos. Nia broke the surface, gasping, holding both children above the water. Emma's face was pale, her breath stuttering. Ethan still writhed weakly. Without hesitation, Nia pressed her lips to Emma's, breathing urgent little bursts. 1, 2, 3. A choking cough rattled from the child's chest, then a stream of water spilled out. Emma wailed a broken, hiccuping cry that unleashed a wave of relief through the crowd. James shook as he gathered his daughter, his tears soaking into his ruined shirt. Ethan kept wailing in Nia's arms, the piercing sound cutting through the suffocating night. Strange as it was, that cry was the sweetest proof of life. Meanwhile, Vanessa stood back, her face drained of color, no makeup strong enough to cover her fear. The stark image, one trembling maid in soaked clothes clutching a child, and one glittering bride frozen on the sidelines, seared into the memory of every guest. And when the cameras flashed again, when whispers spread like fire through the night, a question quietly rose in every heart. Who truly carried the heart of a mother at this engagement party? All right then, my dear audience, if you're still watching and find this story gripping, drop a 1 or comment. I'm still here to keep listening. The only sound that lingered after the horrifying scream was the crash of water exploding into glittering shards under the golden lights. A tray of champagne hit the tiled edge, crystal glasses shattering into fragments, but no one cared anymore. Every gaze, like drawn by a magnet, followed the small figure of Nia sinking and rising in the pool. Her dark uniform clung heavy to her body, dragging her down, yet her arms cut powerfully through the water in practiced strokes. Without a second's hesitation, Nia surged forward like a trained swimmer, her eyes blazing in the darkness. Beneath the cold surface, she wrapped one arm around Emma's back, grabbed Ethan with the other, and pushed with all her strength toward the edge. On the deck, hundreds of guests held their breath. The music had stopped. Only the wind and pounding hearts filled the silence. James knelt by the poolside, trembling hands outstretched, his panicked eyes betraying he had no idea what to do. His expensive shoes soaked, his tie askew. He looked like nothing more than a man stripped of all power in the span of a few seconds. Vanessa, meanwhile, stood a few steps back, her feet lifted to avoid splashes on her glittering gown. Her wide eyes and hands covering her mouth remained frozen. Under the candlelight, the beauty that had shone moments before now looked hollow, cruelly contrasted with Nia battling to keep two fragile lives afloat. At last, Nia pushed Emma up first. A man from the crowd bent down, seizing the child's tiny arm, hauling her from the water. James snatched his daughter into his arms, but her limp body and pale lips nearly paralyzed him. He leaned close, waiting for a breath, but nothing came. Meanwhile, Nia brought Ethan up. The boy coughed violently, a weak cry escaping, earning a collective sigh of relief. But Emma lay still. James swayed, tears welling. He had never seen the line between life and death drawn so thin. Without waiting for anyone, Nia dropped to her knees on the cold tiles, skin scraped, breath ragged. She laid Emma on her back, tilted her head, placed her small hands on the child's chest with precise rhythm. 1, 2, 3. Her hurried breaths filled those tiny lungs. Droplets from her soaked hair fell onto Emma's cheeks, mingling with each compression. The crowd fell utterly silent. Over 300 eyes, phones live streaming, all fixed on the circle where a maid wrestled with death. No one remembered the Versace gown, the fine wine, or the $1 million party. In this moment, only a child's life mattered. And then an eruption. Emma hacked, spitting up the last mouthful of pool water, then wailed in James's trembling arms. That cry, strangely, sounded like Salvation's song. A few in the crowd wept openly, tears streaking over perfectly painted faces. James clutched his daughter tight, his drenched clothes meaningless. He looked at Nia, her wet hair plastered, lips blue, but her eyes shining with resolve. Neither spoke, but the truth was clear. The one who pulled his family back from the edge wasn't the bride in silver, but the nameless girl from the shadows. Far off, a phone camera still streamed, its glow capturing the miraculous moment. No one knew yet that in just a few hours, those clips would sweep across social media, turning a maid into the center of attention and hurling the millionaire's fiancé into a storm of backlash like never before. Would this act of heroism change Nia's life and James's family forever? And before we dive into the next part of the story, don't forget to hit subscribe and like the video. Oh, and be sure to comment below where you're watching from. We'd love to know. As most of the guests were still trembling on their way home, somewhere online a short video had already begun to upload. The title was simple, but provocative: Bridesmaid or Hero? Just a few hours later, that clip exploded like wildfire. On TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, hashtags flooded the feeds. Number hero Nia. Number pool wedding disaster. Number who is the real mom. Millions of views poured in overnight, turning what was supposed to be an exclusive high society celebration into a public spectacle for the entire world. People didn't just see Nia diving into the pool, hair soaked, arms powerful as she held the two children. They also saw James on his knees, shoulders trembling, and Vanessa standing frozen, her silver gown glittering but her eyes empty. Comments crashed in like waves. Why did the bride just scream and do nothing? A stranger loved those kids more than their own mother? Shameful, $1 million party, but no humanity. Someone even remixed Vanessa's shrill scream into an EDM track, syncing it with Naya's chest compressions and Emma's life-saving cry like a beat drop. Cruel, yet undeniable, it racked up millions of shares. The story was no longer just an accident. It had become a global debate. Who is the real mother? The woman in the dazzling gown? Or the maid who plunged into the water to save the children? The media didn't waste a second. The next morning, the New York Post splashed a headline across the front page. $1 million party nearly turns to funeral. Fiancé stood frozen. Morning talk shows opened with the story. One host quipping bitterly, "A wet wedding dress can be replaced, but a child's life cannot." Meanwhile, James became the storm's unwilling focus. On his way out of the office, reporters shoved microphones in his face. Can you really trust your children with a woman who cared more about her gown than their lives? He lowered his head, saying nothing, fists clenched tight as if clinging to the last thread of composure. Vanessa struck back differently. She posted a long statement on Instagram, claiming that in that moment she was in shock and a natural human response is to freeze. The post came with a black and white photo of her by a window, a tear perfectly streaked down her cheek. But instead of sympathy, tens of thousands of angry comments poured in. Tears now? What use are they? As outrage rained down on the glamorous fiancé, Nia's name suddenly shot upward. Some guests revealed she was only a temp worker, hired through an event staffing agency. No one knew much more than her name, and the trembling face caught on camera after she emerged from the pool. Yet that mystery only fueled the frenzy. People dug, shared screenshots, speculated about the girl who had done what a real mother should have done. Nia never showed up online to speak. She vanished after that night, retreating to her small apartment on the outskirts, trying to escape the relentless gaze of the public. But the video kept multiplying, her name welded to the image of the hero Maid. Across the city, James sat alone in his penthouse, Emma and Ethan asleep after their ordeal. His phone buzzed endlessly with news alerts, emails, messages. The glow of the screen lit his face. And in the eyes of a man once confident before billion-dollar boardrooms, only one question remained, haunting him. Would that single moment, the one the whole world witnessed, force him to change his entire life? Is every choice, from now on? The luxurious penthouse high above the city was still ablaze with light, but inside the air was suffocatingly heavy. The $1 million party had ended. The polite laughter had faded, leaving only silence and three presences, James, Vanessa, and the haunting memories that would not let go. James paced across the hardwood floor, his steps weighted. His shirt was still blotched with pool water, his tie discarded hastily, as if even his usual neatness had been swept away by the horror of that moment. He spun around, eyes bloodshot, still gripped by panic. All the pain, fear, and fury poured into a single question. Why? Vanessa sat upright in a leather chair, as flawless as if she had just stepped off a magazine cover. The silver gown had been replaced with a white silk robe, but her air of haughty poise remained. She held a glass of wine, swirling the dark red liquid, as if searching for calm in its depths. But the faint tremor of her fingers betrayed her state. When James spoke, the air froze. Why didn't you jump in to save our children? His voice was hoarse, heavy like a hammer. Vanessa lifted her chin, eyes flashing with defense. Her answer cut out cold and proud. What did you expect of me? A woman in a glittering wedding gown in front of hundreds of cameras to leap into the water and ruin everything? Isn't that why staff are hired nannies, servers, a whole team to handle such things? To anyone else, her words might sound reasonable, but to James, they were a dagger straight into the heart. He staggered back, tilting his head toward the ceiling as if searching for air. The scene at the pool replayed with cruel clarity. The woman he thought would be the mother of his children had only stood frozen, clutching her gown, screaming. And another unknown, without glamour, had hurled herself into the water, risking her life while everyone else only watched. James's fists clenched. He remembered Nia's eyes, terrified yet resolute, her trembling hands pressing steady compressions into Emma's chest. He remembered that moment when his daughter coughed weakly back to life, and his own tears had spilled, not from fear but from knowing her fragile breath had been saved by someone whose name he had barely known. Vanessa kept talking, lips painted red, moving without pause. She insisted the world ran on roles. Some led, others serve, and she was never obliged to do what paid staff were there for. If my dress had been ruined, if my image had been tarnished, that would have been more damaging for us. A bitter thought flickered across James's mind, since when had a dress become worth more than his children's lives? A thin, sardonic smile touched his lips, only to vanish into a hard, icy stare. He turned away, eyes falling toward the bedroom where the twins now slept under a nurse's watch. His chest tightened. In that silence, realization struck. He might have made a mistake. A mistake in choosing who to walk beside him, in trusting glossy photos and honeyed promises. The wind drifted in from the balcony, tugging at the white curtains, bringing a chill into the night. James stood still, letting out a long breath that melted into the emptiness. The fight hadn't ended with shouts or broken glass, but with a hollow ache that echoed longer than any crashing wave. In his mind, Nia's image replayed again and again, each detail etched like a slow-motion reel. A young woman, no dazzling gown, no flashing cameras, yet with the courage to do what his bride-to-be could not. If the woman he called his fiancée couldn't protect his children, in the moment between life and death, was she worthy of entering this family? Dear viewers, are you still with me? Take a moment, sip some water, and stay tuned for what comes next. Comment 1 if you're finding this story gripping, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the towering glass panes of the luxury hotel in Los Angeles. Nia walked quietly down the corridor, her uniform still carrying the faint smell of chlorine mixed with perfume from the night before. She kept her head low, hoping to blend into the flow of other staff, but the manager was already waiting at the desk. His face was cold, the clipboard tapping sharply against his palm. Causing a disruption at the event, he said, his voice like a verdict. In the world of million-dollar parties, a maid diving into the pool in front of hundreds of guests was not seen as heroic. It was seen as an unwelcome incident. Nia swallowed hard, her hand gripping the edge of her apron. She knew no one would stand up for her. But then the revolving door suddenly spun open. James Wilson walked in white shirt, loosened tie, dark circles under his eyes as if he hadn't slept a minute. The millionaire arrived without his usual entourage, stripped of his trademark pride. He moved straight toward her, ignoring the stunned look on the manager's face, and stopped directly in front of Nia. In that moment, her heart skipped. The man she had only ever seen in Forbes magazine, the same man who had knelt helpless by the pool last night, was now looking at her with an expression filled with gratitude and urgency. He didn't waste words. Just one short sentence, powerful enough to alter her life. Can you temporarily become the caregiver for my twins? Nia froze. Familiar worries crowded her mind. The world of the elite was never meant for her. The flashing lights, the gossip, the power games. Stepping into it meant being pulled into a whirlwind of scrutiny, where even the smallest mistake could become a public spectacle. Yet James's eyes, bloodshot from sleeplessness, made her pause. Behind the mask of a billionaire was a very real fear, the fear of losing his children. James continued, as if sensing her hesitation. He promised 5 times her current pay, along with accommodation in his penthouse, a place of palatial luxury. But more than that, his voice trembled as he admitted, he needed someone who could love his children, not just perform the duties of a nanny. Nia exhaled slowly. In her mind echoed Emma's giggles, Ethan's desperate sobs. The night before, she had felt the fragile weight of their lives in her arms. To refuse now would mean turning her back on two small souls who had already placed their trust in her embrace. She gave a quiet nod. Within a week, the picture inside the penthouse was transformed. What once felt like a cold museum, silent hallways, a living room so pristine it was lifeless, was now alive with laughter and the patter of tiny feet. Nia turned the space into a real home. The rugs bore new crayon stains, the couch cushions softened under toddler tumbles, and the kitchen doors opened more often than ever before. James watched silently. A man once consumed only by contracts and numbers now found himself caught in the smallest details. The clink of a spoon against a plastic bowl, the stubborn frown when a child refused bedtime, the radiant look in their eyes during story time. One afternoon, returning from a meeting, he stumbled upon a scene that rooted him in place. Emma wobbling her first steps into Nia's arms while Ethan sat clapping from the floor in delight. And then, the unexpected happened. As Emma's tiny arms wrapped tightly around Nia's neck, her lips formed the faint babbling sound. "Mama?" The world stopped. James heard every beat of his own heart. His tears came silently, streaming down his cheeks. He understood then that such a bond could never be bought with money, nor staged with appearances. It came only from presence, from unconditional love. And in that moment, he knew his life had veered onto a path from which there was no return. But would Nia's presence in this newfound family be embraced, or would it ignite another storm fueled by the past and the unrelenting eyes of the public? The studio lights poured down, casting an artificial glow over a face perfected with makeup. Vanessa sat there, on the plush red velvet chair of a famous talk show. She held a tissue delicately, dabbing at her eyes as if trying to keep her mascara from smudging. Each tear that fell was caught by the camera's zoom, broadcast across the nation, a carefully crafted image of a broken mother. The host's voice was smooth, tinged with a hint of sympathy. "Do you feel like you've been shut out of your children's lives?" Vanessa nodded, her shoulders trembling just enough. Her answer came out in sobs, but with clarity. She had been pushed out of the twins' hearts, that James in the coldness of a millionaire had chosen a maid over his fiancée. In the audience, some shook their heads, some sighed, while social media instantly erupted into heated debate. Behind the studio lights, Vanessa's lawyer was already preparing the next move. A custody petition was filed with the Los Angeles Family Court, demanding guardianship of the twins. Thick files, stamped in red with the word urgent, quickly became her weapon. On the day of the hearing, tension hung like a tightened string. Reporters swarmed the courthouse steps, microphones thrust forward, headlines primed to explode. Millionaire Wilson's custody battle. James sat in the defendant's chair, his face strained, dark circles under his eyes betraying sleepless nights. Beside him, Nia took her place in the witness row, hair tied back, face bare of makeup but lit with quiet resolve. In her heart, Emma and Ethan were not legal leverage, but two fragile souls who had once clung to her neck and whispered the trembling word, "Mama." Vanessa entered in a sleek black dress, her expression icy nothing like the fragile image she had painted on television. Her gaze cut through the room until it landed on Nia, sharp and bristling. This was no longer a silent standoff, but a public war under the eyes of both the law and the world. Her attorney opened with footage pulled from the internet, clips of James and Nia laughing with the twins, their eyes locked like a family. He spun a narrative of betrayal, claiming James had replaced his fiancée with a lowly employee, staging a fake mother to manipulate public opinion. The judge's gavel struck hard, calling for order. When James's lawyer rose, the tone shifted. No grandstanding, no emotional pleas, just evidence. Meticulously kept records. Feeding schedules, sleep logs, medical notes, all handwritten by Nia, marked with precise times, dosages, developmental milestones. Photographs showed Emma taking her first steps in Nia's arms, Ethan asleep against her chest. The room fell silent. The presiding judge, a seasoned woman with decades on the bench, lifted her gaze to Vanessa. Her voice dropped, cold and cutting. But who has been the one raising these children every day? The question landed like a stone. No one could answer for Vanessa. The truth was undeniable. Not her, not the former nannies who had fled after the poolside disaster. Only two names remained: James and Nia. James bowed his head, his hands clenched into fists, waves of emotion crashing inside him. He had never wanted this to become a battle of winners and losers. He only wanted his children to grow up in arms that truly loved them. Yet, in that moment he knew, this fight would not end at the courthouse steps. If Vanessa could not win through maternal love, what darker weapons would she reach for to reclaim the spotlight she had lost? The courtroom that morning felt like a stage wound tight, every breath pulled taut beneath the scrutiny of public opinion and the glare of cameras. Harsh white lights from overhead fixtures poured down onto the long wooden table, illuminating James's weary eyes and the rigid mask on Vanessa's face. Outside, dozens of broadcast vans raised their antennas to the sky. Viewers across America were watching every second unfold. And then, as if fate itself had grown impatient, Emma's cry pierced the solemn air, shattering the courtroom's formality. Ethan's thin, wobbly voice followed, and suddenly both twins were wailing together. The sound, innocuous in a home here, became a devastating blow, cutting straight through the tension. Lawyers froze mid-sentence. The judge frowned. Jurors exchanged uneasy glances. Vanessa rushed forward, but her every movement was clumsy, foreign. She tried to lift Emma, diamond bracelet flashing under the lights, but her trembling hands made the child squirm harder, pushing her away as the cries swelled louder. She turned to Ethan, but the boy twisted aside, his small fists clutching desperately at James's shirt. James gathered both children into his arms, his grip desperate, as if trying to prove with sheer force that he was their father. He rocked, he patted, but the sobs would not soften. Sweat trickled down his temple, mingling with the hollow panic in his eyes. The man who once commanded billions with a signature was utterly helpless before the raw grief of his children. And then, from the gallery behind, a figure rose. Nia. She didn't wait to be called, didn't pause for permission from counsel. Instinct alone guided her, the instinct of someone who knew exactly what the children needed. Her steps were soft but steady, heels clicking against the floor like a heartbeat in the chaos. She knelt, opening her arms. Her eyes met the twins with a tenderness as natural as breathing. One long breath, a whisper so gentle it seemed to weave through the silence. Shh, it's okay. As if by miracle, the crying ceased. Emma buried her face into Nia's shoulder. Ethan let go of James's shirt and reached out for her. The entire courtroom froze in stunned silence. Cameras stopped clicking. Pens hovered midair. Everyone bore witness to the undeniable bond unfolding before them. The judge, a woman seasoned by decades on the bench, slowly removed her glasses. She studied the scene for a long moment, eyes glinting with a trace of sorrow. Then she exhaled, and her words rang clear, firm, and heavy with moral judgment. Perhaps the question is not who bears the title of mother, but who is truly being one. In that moment, Vanessa gripped the armrest, her nails digging into the wood. Humiliation seeped into every breath she took. James sat in silence, eyes wet, his heart torn between pain and relief. And Nia, she did not smile in triumph. She simply cradled the two children, rocking them as she did every night, her face weary yet serene. Outside the courthouse, a new debate erupted. Who truly deserved the title of mother? The woman with a marriage certificate, or the woman who had given the children life for a second time? Would the final judgment lean toward the law, or the heart, and would that change the fate of all three forever? The courtroom fell still, but the resonance of that moment lingered. The twins lay quietly in Nia's arms, their cheeks flushed pink, their breathing steady like the gentle heartbeat of hope. James watched them, his eyes filled with love yet shadowed by turmoil. He knew the decision ahead would change everything, not just for him, not just for Nia, but for the future of Emma and Ethan. Vanessa left the courthouse on unsteady steps, but the tight smile pressed on her lips revealed one thing. She had never been someone to give up easily. Behind the camera flashes, a new plan was already taking shape. And in that storm, no one could know what would come next. This story leaves us with a simple yet powerful lesson. True love is not found in titles or glittering promises, but in the small, patient actions of every day. Sometimes the one who truly becomes mother or father is not the person with the title, but the one who reaches out when it matters most. Dear viewers, that is the power of presence and unconditional love. And what about you? Who do you believe truly deserves to be called mother in this story? Will James find new happiness with Nia, or are there still storms of law and media waiting ahead? If this story touched your heart, share it with your family and friends in the United States to spread the message of love, responsibility, and family. Don't forget to leave a comment below, share your thoughts, and tell us whether you want to see part 2 of this story. Because sometimes, your interaction and your voice are the very reasons we continue bringing you stories that heal, inspire, and stir the soul.